desde las aulas hasta los rincones más creativos del arte. Hay quienes dedican su vida a impulsar la equidad educativa y la diversidad en el liderazgo. Uno de ellos es Candelario Cervantes, un ejecutivo que no solo ostenta un alto cargo en Teach for America, sino que también es el presidente de Art by Cervantes. Su pasión y compromiso lo han llevado a ser reconocido por el Houston Business Journal y Prospánica. Desde el corazón de Houston, donde reside con su familia, nos comparte su visión y misión. Bienvenido, Candelario Cervantes.
Hello, everybody. Mauricio García here once again. Excited as always with another great podcast episode. It is exciting for me because every time we get the opportunity to dive into the mind of another successful example human being. And today we have somebody that I've been wanting to interview for quite some time. And today, which is my birthday, by the way, it happens to be. So what a great gift. Candelario Cervantes, how are you, man?
I'm doing well. Happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, we tried to do this in our tour, doing the Latin Talk tour, and there was so much chaos, right, going on that we couldn't really do it at that time. And so here we are, having this great opportunity. I want to begin with the first question because being an immigrant, right, where in my family, like my father, he didn't really finish high school. Neither did my mom. And I saw like how in my family, none of us actually have a college degree. So for many Latinos, immigrants, like being that first person that breaks the cycle is so important. So if I'm not mistaken, you're the first in your family to earn a graduate degree, right?
Yes, a graduate degree. Second, my mom was actually the first in our entire family to get a bachelor's degree and graduate. And I always tell her, thank you. When we think about legacies, and my abuelitos also came from Mexico around, 1900 and settled in South Texas. And they always said, Mijito, like, your inheritance is your education because no one can take it away from you. And they instilled that legacy into my family. And I think about that in my work. And when we talk about, don't forget where you come from and don't forget like those legacies and what legacy do you want to leave. I think of them and I think of that work and how important that was and how they instilled it in my family. And, we have the data. When you have a Latina that's educated, they will change the direction of their entire family, right? Well, my mom did that. So I always tell her, thank you.
No, absolutely. There's so much to say about that, but let's dive in. So basically, there's a lot of influencers right now on social media, right, saying sort of going in the narrative that an education is not really required to be successful. I disagree with that, even though I don't have a master's degree, right? I did go to college. I dropped out because I couldn't really afford it at one time. And then I got in the financial industry and learned that sales and just getting my licenses and everything, that would get me to where I wanted to go. And I wasn't really passionate in the beginning as to what I was going to college for. But that doesn't mean that I don't agree with the fact that, we need more lawyers, we need more doctors, we need more engineers. And for all those type of things, you do need to go to school and get an education. What have you seen? Because you're very involved in that, teaching, educating people, and really trying to create the platform so that people can reach their maximum potential in that space. What have you noticed, like in the last decade, in terms of Latinos really pursuing like a professional degree versus just going the entrepreneurial route?
That's a great question. We have all the data, showing if you have a college degree, you'll make X times more than if you didn't, right? I believe it's about $1 million more, right, of your lifetime.
That's true.
And, I really think through how we talk about education and how important all kinds of education, right? And I look at my own lived experience and that of my family. I shared my mom was the first to get a bachelor's degree in our family, right? Well, my dad, he had planned to go to college when he graduated from high school, which was huge at that moment in time and place, right? When I think about, you have to think about all the conditions, right? So in that moment in time and place, my dad graduated. He ended up getting a job at Southwestern Bell, which is now AT&T, as a lineman. So the people would climb up the poles and put the wires up, right? I still remember a story, if I'm telling this, they're now making us bury this optic cable, and it's like this new thing. We have to, I'm like reflect back, oh my God, Dad, like you literally laid the groundwork for the internet, like literally did that work, right? But he got drafted into the Army, and he always shares this story that, because he had telecom experience, it saved his life, because he wasn't put into front infantry of all his friends. He was actually put into the telecom division of the military, right? So like thinking about how all types, all levels of education are important. And in this case specifically, how it can literally save your life, right? Dad eventually, got out of the Army, went back to work at Southwestern Bell, retired, and he went back to school at the age of 60 and got a bachelor's degree, where he then was able to become a teacher aide and teach, special education at his home high school where he graduated. So like thinking through that, right? Like I think about all those conditions and how important all types, all levels, and continual education, right? And it's like, even now, like I have a graduate degree, an MBA, but I'm like, I'm not done. Like there's no arrival. Like you're constantly learning, especially when we think about DEI, identity development, belonging work. There's no arrival. Like you're continuing to do identity development work. You're continuing to learn and grow and learn about other communities, right? So I think through that lens when we talk about education.
No, I think that's the right mindset. I don't know. I've heard this quote, and I don't know if this is exactly how the original quote is written, but it's, don't let the teachings interfere with your education, right? Like if that's a constant thing, and that should be that sort of the mindset where it's not just get the degree and you stop. It's education, whether it is professional or whether it is something for your profession, like whatever you're trying to really become the best at is an ongoing, forever polishing the craft. But what I am curious though is to, and hearing from your words, because I obviously did a lot of research, but I think we will all benefit a lot more if we learned from you directly, the Latinx alliances and just everything you're doing in the area of helping people really more pursue a professional career, and how you champion education. Like what is the ultimate goal of what you're doing and how you're going about it on a daily basis?
Yeah, I feel tremendously privileged to have a role where it's truly work-life integration. So I work at Teach for America. We're one of the largest educational equity nonprofits in the country. Our vision is that one day all children in this nation have an opportunity to attain an excellent education, right? And I say, regardless of what zip code you live in, right? Because we know all the structures and barriers and like all the things that impact educational equity. So, I have the privilege to really think through, like, how do we ensure all of our communities reach their full potential? And thinking through that lens, and even putting my own lived experience in that of my community members, our folks, right? And navigating these complicated systems and structures that were never intended or created for us, for our communities, right? Like, how do we navigate those systems, dismantle them, make it easier for the next generation, and remove the racist policies and structures that have kept our communities, apart and frankly, disempowered. So all the topics that we talk about, right? How do we help our communities reach their full potential, educational, social, economic potential, and power? Like, it starts with education. And I'm a firm believer in that, and when you ask, like, what is like the thing that drives me, it's like navigating these systems was so hard, even with my family that knew enough about the education system to advocate for me, right? Because when I was in grade school, they had put me into a group that was like not really college tracked. But fortunately, my family knew about how to navigate the system. They're like, no, his scores are really high. He actually needs to be put on those honors programs, right? Alongside my teachers to advocate for me to be in those honors programs. If they hadn't done that, I don't know, like, if I would have the same level of opportunities. that I do now, right? So like even thinking through that lens and then navigating the entire college system and structure, right? Like that was extremely hard, like to this day. And I've been working in the social sector for about over 20 years now. Like when folks have asked, like, what is the hardest thing you've ever done in your career? I'm like, first semester of college. That is the hardest thing I've ever done.
I read that and I'm wondering, but you know, I'm very curious that you say that the structure is sort of was not designed for like our community or people of color, right? How is that? Like, how you do identify that? Like, what were the things you identified? This is the reasons why I believe or know that the system, the way it was originally set up, is not really in a way that can help people from our community excel in this as they pursue the professional career.
Yeah, when you look at the history, right, education was intended for the elite, folks that had like wealth in class, right? Mm-hmm. And even in the way that we set up education, like it's, you know, folks is like, education is broken. Like, actually, no, it's working the way it was designed to work. It would be like, you know, we educate our folks that have the class, and then from the rubbish, right, like gems would emerge. Rubbish, yes. Like folks that weren't of the wealthy social elite class, right? And we see that happening now, right? Like if you are able to navigate the complicated systems and structures, have the additional supports, like you will excel, right? So when we think about that, like how do we dismantle, break those systems? Even when we talk about in the workplace, this is the part, like I think about how do we dismantle these white male dominated systems and structures. Like all of our systems and structures are developed from that, like even in the workplace, right? Like when we talk to our community members, I do a lot of work on the executive leadership work through some of our partners. And the constant thing that we hear from our community members, like, well, I didn't know there was a game to play to advance, right? Or there were rules. Like what?
Right.
And then once you like show the rules, right? Like this is how you navigate the system to structures, advance into those executive level rules, like from marketing yourself to like talking about like all your accomplishments, like those things that were contrary to many of our communities, like ways of being, right? Like you don't market yourself, like work real hard, keep your head down. That's how you advance. Well, that's not how you navigate these systems and structures, right? So like doing that for myself is really hard. And I'm like, I don't want other folks to have to struggle. I am not of the mind like, oh, I struggled too. Like you have to too, like pay your dues. Like, no, like we need to make it easier for the next generation. So I'm about like, how do we remove those barriers and structures so that, you know, other folks, the next generation doesn't have to do that or struggle as much, right? Because it's still going to be hard. Absolutely. But it doesn't have to be this hard.
Very good. Well, very well put. Now, obviously, we still lag, right, in terms of the percentage of Latinos, even second and third generation, that are really pursuing and completing an MBA and even PhD and so on. Mm-hmm. What in addition to maybe the system still working its way through making it simple, what other psychological things do you feel, or maybe financial reasons why we're not, completing professional careers at a higher number, like whites, as an example, or Asians? Or
I've been thinking about that question for a really long time and thinking through the work that I do. Like putting race on this, right, too, and thinking through my own privileges.
Sure.
I've been able to like better understand, like, oh, how did I navigate this system? It was hard, but it wasn't as hard as I saw as for others, right? And when I put that lens, that racial lens, and looking through my own privilege, like I am light-skinned, I am straight cisgendered male, right? Like all these other privileges, able-bodied, right? Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, I had all these additional privileges, unearned privileges, right? That benefited me in navigating these complicated systems and structures. So I think about that lens too. And when we even think about our community and how like anti-Blackness is still a thing, anti-Indigeneity is still a thing. like we need to have those conversations, and we need to help think through an equity lens, intersectional lens, and like how do we best support other communities. And like, I had this conversation with myself, like, oh my God, what did I have that made it easier? And how do I interrogate that to like, focus on the systems of the things that need to be changed that are in my locus of control, right? To make it better, because you're right. Like we are severely underrepresented in those degree programs.
I understand.
My wife's a PhD, right? A clinical psychologist, and still like it's only 1% of our community has PhDs.
I'm a big believer that not adopting, and I'm not saying this is what you're saying, but just not adopting any sort of like victim mentality. Like I know, regardless of where you're starting, because not everybody starts at the same place, right? I mean, there are disadvantages sometimes, and a lot of it is financial, and some of it could even be mindset or connection. A lot of things, but I'm a big believer that if you stay driven, if you stay consistent, right, that if you persevere, you will achieve. If there's a will, there's a way. How much of the mindset that you were the way that you were programmed as a kid, right, helped you break through everything? In addition to these privileges, you may say in unknown privileges, things, I think a lot of it is also the mindset, right? Because you can see a gazillion people that would have these privileges that you're talking about, still they don't achieve, right? So a lot of it is the mindset. I want to dive into that. If you can sort of go back and say, well, you know what, I would probably point at and contribute my success to these sort of lessons that my grandfather, my mom, or my dad sort of taught me along the way. I picked them up and they helped me in my life, so that people that are listening today can take notes of those things. Because again, I think it's an 80 or 90% mind game than it is about strategy. Or
I totally agree with you on those pieces. And I think when I was speaking earlier, it was now that I'm in those seats, now that we're in those positions of power, like we need to think through a little bit more, because we actually have the ability to change or pull those levers, right? Where other folks don't, when we talk about positional power and such. But on terms of mindsets, I stems from my abuelitos, right? Like I think of my our ancestors. Like they came to this country navigating these complicated systems and structures, knowing it was better for our family, and like the importance for them to even know, to recognize like education is the thing that I need to make sure my kids do, and they sacrifice so much. I even thinking about my mom, right? When I talk about time and place, like her having to navigate it, and like I think through like all the things, all the challenges, yes, I have faced, is nothing to compare to what my grandparents and my parents did, right? So how do I now like push forward?
What's our
and when I advocated, right? When I was saying like my parents advocated like, oh, his scores need to be in those honor classes, he needs to do that. I'm like, in my mind I was like, oh my God, what? I'm making straight A's. I have all my friends here. Like, why would I want to be put in those courses where I'm going to be one of the only? Those kids are the ones that make fun of me. Like, why would I want to do that, right? But, I really thought about what my grandparents said, and I just, I had to figure it out and navigate it. And yes, it was hard, but my end goal is like, I need to do this in order to move to the next level, like understanding what I needed to do to navigate these systems and structures. So I needed to go to college, right? So I needed to make sure I need to position myself to be able to do the things I needed to do, like the long game, and figure out like, how do I build those building blocks so I can get to college to the next level, right? Even when we're thinking about our work in like the professional setting, the mindset I have is around like, it's always been a give strategy. And I'm Roman Catholic, so I always center back on love. Like that is the ultimate like gift, and the ultimate thing that we're supposed to do is love. So when I position my leadership journey around that, like all the principles that are developed on the research that show what a true leader is and how do you navigate these systems, people achieve, like we think through those categories, they all stem back from love, right? So when I'm thinking through like, oh my God, this is really hard, my whole strategy is like, well, how do I support our community at the same time? Think through like, what are the things that are going to support me and my learning, right? So when we're talking to professionals, I'm like, start a resource group. If there isn't one in your company, start one, right? So that you can create the space and PD for our communities to be able to help advance and navigate those systems. At the same time, right, you're getting the skills to be able to like lead a company or lead a business. Because when you're leading those resource groups or even like chapter organizations or, you know, our partner orgs, like you're building the skill set to do that. You're also building the social network, right? Because especially if you're leading a resource group in a company, you're getting visibility of top leaders across the enterprise, right? And folks are going to start looking at you as like, oh, you're that leader, right? That you're helping support the business imperative, but at the same time, you're helping our community members navigate and hopefully advance into those like executive leadership level roles. So, you know, my thing has been like, yes, it's a drive. It's going to be hard. But, you know, like at the end of the day, like when we talk about the legacy work, that's what drives me. Like, how do I make it easier? And when I see other folks advance into those leadership level roles, like, yes, like this is exactly why we're doing this work. So yeah, it comes back from my grandparents, you know, they were sharecroppers. Right? Like it was really, really hard work. And what I'm doing now, yes, it's hard, but it is nothing in comparison to like that level of work. Even my dad, right, doing the work out in the heat, climbing poles where his body is taking a toll. But yet, yeah, like we're still doing it. And then I also saw them still giving back to our community. You know, my mom shared a story with us. One of the community members, we grew up in a rural community. They still live there in South Texas. And one of the community members came up to her and they said, I just want to tell you, thank you. You're the daughter of Pablo and Manuela Ramirez, right? And she's like, yes. And she's like, why? Well, because my grandparents knew to come to your parents' house for support when they came to this country, and they knew that they would help them navigate, like how to find a job, all the things, right? And my mom just like took a step back. I was like, oh my gosh, like I just thought like there were other family members coming in, like we saw that happen, right? So like that legacy of them supporting, my mom did the same, my dad did the same.
Yeah, those are great examples you can't overlook, right? And they do definitely something in the psyche. And it's part of the foundation that makes you, you know, what you are today. I've always believed that, you know, who you surround yourself with, it transforms you. I had this experience when, you know, when I was 14, I came to the States at 8. By 14, I was already in enough trouble. As a matter of fact, I got jumped into a gang up in Wisconsin. I had no idea. I just wanted to kind of be a part of the cool kids. I guess that was kind of a cool thing for me back in the day. But point I'm making is that I at the age of 14, at the same time, I also went to Mexico back to school. And I was immersed into a different sort of environment. And without me knowing, it changed me. How was Candelario's environment moving, you know, moving up in age, and by the time you got to college, like, because a lot of the environment that you're in, I think, has to do with who you turned out to be. That you had to change, or I'm actually trying to get to some of the setbacks and how you dealt with those setbacks, because it also speaks to the mindset. Yeah. Part of it is, like you're saying, you know, you're entering in this world, all these complicated systems, you didn't know how to navigate. That's fine. There are other things in life that come through and that are sometimes a little bit more complicated than understanding systems. But to be more clear, I guess what the question is, how was the environment you were growing up in terms of the friends that you had? Like, who were you in high school?
Who was I in high school? Wow, yeah. That takes me back. You know, a key lever is my family. And when I talk about those privileges, right, like both my parents, right, were so supportive of me doing what I needed to do and what I wanted to do, right? And I just remember those support systems always being there. Like my dad, you know, he worked so hard. You know, he'd leave the house at 5 a.m. and come back really late. But, you know, he always made time to show up to every single one of my my football practices.
Wow.
Not the games, not just the practices, right? And he would sit there and like wait, and he would pick me up, right? But he would be there at every practice. And my family would come to every single one of my games, right? Or, you know, when I started painting, you know, they brought me to Houston because, you know, we had a rodeo art show and I ended up winning best of show in like my ISD. And, you know, they made the sacrifices to like bring me to Houston to come to the rodeo to get the award. So like those level of supports, and they did the same things for my brothers, right? Like, and they would move heaven and earth to make sure that we had all the supports or resources.
So you really had your parents so close to you all along the way, supporting you in every sort of ability that you were learning, like whether that's painting, whether there was sports. They were there all the time.
Oh yes, yeah, and then also community members, right? Like we had so many community members just show up and like be so supportive of all the things that we were doing.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying, through that environment. What about like the type of friends you were hanging out with? Did you spend a lot of time being out with friends, or were you more like sort of like a solo?
Yeah, you know, honestly, I was a farm boy, right? So we didn't really have a big farm, but we just had a couple head of cows and chickens, and so we had chores. So our things were like, okay, I gotta get home because I need to go take care of all the animals. Also, I need to go work on the fence that I seem to be endlessly like needing to have like maintenance. So like
sounds like the kind of lifestyle I want to give my kids nowadays, as they go with electronics. I'm like, okay, we're going to the farm and get some chicken, cows, and you know, you're gonna be out there playing.
Yeah, you're doing the manual labor, and also like, I don't know. I felt like at the time I was like, oh my gosh, why? Like I want to be out and doing the other things like others do, kids. But like I learned so much in doing that work.
No, absolutely.
And I think when you asked for about a setback, you know, when I was in college, when I said that first semester of college was so hard, it was because I found out how ill prepared I was academically, but then also like socially. This was the first time I met students and people of like wealth. Like I was just happy we had central heating and air, and the food was decent right at the school. But like I leaned into what I knew. I made relationships with the other students. I saw like who the folks are like, okay, this is really easy for them. Let me pick their brain. Like, how do I navigate? Like, what are you doing? What are your study techniques? And then I also leaned in on connecting with my teachers, the faculty. Dr. Armani was my bio teacher. And she was the first person to ever ask me like this question. I ask this to folks all the time now. Like, what is it that you love to do? What is it that you really want to do, right? And that set me back. I'm like, what? Like, no one's ever asked me that. And when I shared with her, and this is the other part, I also empower people, like share with people, like, what are those dreams? Like, what are those things? I told her I wanted to paint. I love doing studio artwork. And she was like, oh my God, like we have graphic art designs. We have studio art degree partnerships with the museum. Like, why are you doing this? And I was just like, oh my God, I didn't even know those are opportunities. I didn't even know those are things, right? So she was
you're opening something else in terms of, you know, gaining clarity. So obviously going in, when did you say that you got like clear totally on exactly what path you wanted to take?
I'm still working on it. I think that's ever evolving, right? Like I have clarity on the things, right?
New information sort of create new patterns and
especially
things.
In this new environment that we're in now, right?
Right.
Like there's a host of opportunities. The thing that I'm very clear on is whatever I'm doing, I want to make sure I'm leaving the legacy of where I'm making it better for the next generation, for the next person behind me. That's like, I am very clear on that. Like whatever it is that I'm working on, wherever I'm at, like I'm really trying to make sure that I'm supporting folks And take a line from Nina Vaca, like, she's like, I don't help people, I support people. Like, because our community doesn't need help, we just need support. And like, yeah, like absolutely. Supporting folks.
Oh, that's great. Well, like, that's a winning proposition. No matter how you look at it, it's just leaving people better than you found them, and being able to leave that legacy. Man, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add. I kind of want to wrap it up. But if there's any message for the Latino community in terms of what you see, the things that we should be taking advantage of, whether we're first generation, second generation. I mean, you're certainly an example of how things can be accomplished, right? And that in education, you can't go wrong with it. For so many different reasons, we wouldn't have enough time to mention all that. Yeah. But just any closing comments on the.
Well, I want to thank you and all the work that you're doing to support our folks and like getting the financial literacy work, right? Like that is another level of education, right? Like we talk about how our community needs to create wealth. Well, like how do you do that if you don't even know what questions to ask, right?
That's true.
So like, thank you, because I know the work that you're doing in that space. I think the thing I will share that someone shared with me that really helped me is, I want our community members to have the permission to dream. I think folks like, I want you to dream, but like, no, I think it's the permission, because I feel like so many times when I interact with folks, it's like, oh, I can't do that. Like even myself, right? I would love to continue painting and do that work. But I said to them, like, oh no, they're going to see me as a starving artist. That's all my family's going to hear, right? Rather than putting my full force in, like, actually I could be really, really good at this and do what I love. And so I think that part is like, continue to dream and dream big, right?
I love it.
And then find the supports, the folks that are going to support you in achieving that dream, right? I think that would be.
No, I love it. I love it. I have found, and I don't know if this happened to you, but I have, that when you dream big, right, and you back it up by actions, whether sometimes the people that you need, they somehow magically appear, like these resources, because somebody's always watching. So it's just about, it's on us to initiate, to move forward, and then you'll find a teacher. Just like you mentioned, when you went into school, you found the people, right? They came to your life, and then they kind of guided you to where you want to go. You find the mentors, because people that are out there doing things, they immediately identify other doers. Doers identify doers, and most of them are generous people. You'll find that they'll be helping you out. So great message, man. Enjoyed the conversation. Candelario, thank you so much, man. I'll send you a big hug. You're in Texas, right?
Yes.
Right now? Mm-hmm. All right, big hug all the way to Texas. Hoping that we'll have another chance to dive deeper into this, maybe in a different context and another series, because there's a lot more to talk about. Have a great one.
I love that. Take care.
All right, and you too, man. Take care. Bye. So there you have it. I'm sure you got a lot of good nuggets from this conversation. Make sure that you share with the people you love. Make sure it's very easy to like and then also share. And of course, Candelario's information is going to be somewhere around you watching this interview for you to follow him, maybe even interact with him on his social media profiles. So with that being said, thank you so much for being with us today, for sharing this time with us. We'll see you in the next interview. Take care.